All right, this is Andy Brown from UFans.net, and we're joined with a special guest today, Mr. Erik McKinney from WeAreSC.com. Erik, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Looking forward to Saturday. Should be a fun one.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Big fans of your site. You guys kind of helped us get going the other year, so we're in debt to you and hoping for a really good matchup this Saturday. Obviously, it's the 15th, and it's 8 o'clock Eastern at Rice Eccles Stadium. It's going to be loud. It's going to be on Fox. USC comes into the game 6-0, so they've exceeded all expectations. And Utah has stumbled twice; they're 4-2. So, like we spoke about yesterday, Erik, USC was picked to finish third in the conference and go 9-3, and now they might be poised for a college football playoff run. What are your thoughts on their performance so far this season?
I think it's been, you look at the first six games, and it just was not a super daunting schedule. We talked in the offseason once the schedule was released. It was basically exactly what USC, I think, probably wanted their schedule to be. There was kind of the early Stanford thing. You didn't know what Stanford was going to be like, and then the early sort of trip to Corvallis, which has always been for USC kind of a place where they can trip up. But no, 6-0 obviously was a best case scenario for this team. I think people thought that they could get there. In the past years, you've always had a USC team that found some way to trip up. And if they had gotten into a
Mhm.
tight one, they're not going to be able to pull it out. They got one with Oregon State. They were able to pull it out. They were in kind of a back and forth with Arizona State, able to pull away. Same thing with Washington State, able to pull away. So I do think they've exceeded expectations, probably for people outside that didn't maybe have an idea of how much work Lincoln Riley and the staff put into kind of throwing everything out that was USC football when they got there, and turning the whole thing around. The new culture that they talked about, and every coach talks about a new culture, right? But you've seen sort of the buy-in, and you've seen how it's changed
Mhm.
for this roster and this team, and a lot of that was bringing in guys that wanted to win, and wanted to sort of take USC back to where it was. Teach a lot of the returning guys, no, 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 this is how we have to do stuff now, and that's played out to where they're tougher, they're more physical. It's not all talk, and they've actually done really well. The challenges are still coming though, right? The
Of
three
course.
biggest games on the schedule are still to come. So I don't know if we'll find out everything USC's made of until Saturday. It's been so far so good though, in terms of not shooting themselves in the foot, and not kind of falling apart. They've done all the things they've needed to do at this point in the season.
Sure. So, why does USC win this football game?
It starts with Caleb Williams. I mean, he is a phenomenal quarterback for people that haven't been able to see him up close. His ability to sort of sense pressure in the pocket, to get out, to make positive plays out of just about everything. When he is on, he's as good a quarterback as there is in the country. There's still skill guys everywhere. But I think what it comes down to outside of Caleb is the USC offensive line is good this year. They are good. It was one of those things where us covering the team, we saw those steps forward last year, even in a 4-8 season that was just abysmal. No, nobody in the program wanted to be there that season and go through that. But the offensive line actually got better and better. It was easy, sort of nationally, for people who don't see the team all the time to just kind of throw that out. They're not rushing for a lot of yards. They're not pushing people around. The offensive line's no good. They've got big questions. It's a good group up front, and Lincoln Riley's offense asks them to do a lot, especially in the run game. And I think the fact that going into this year, you don't have a huge lopsided, well, Utah's defensive front is miles better than USC's offensive line, which is I think how it's been, kind of the
Hmm.
last few seasons. This year it looks more, toss up, or even like maybe USC has kind of a slightish edge there. And I think that's big for USC to be able to go in and do that. And so that's offensively. And then defensively, that they've been able to take the ball away from teams this year. They didn't have one against Washington State, but they lead the nation in turnover margin. They lead the nation in interceptions. They've been able to get pressure on quarterbacks. They lead the nation in sacks. All the defensive stats that you kind of want. They've been able to make big plays when they've needed them. And so I think both sides of the ball kind of you see reasons that USC can win this game.
Sure. And I think any great team, you know, makes the plays when they have to. And I think USC has proven so far this season that they can score points when they need to. So they're not always as efficient as you'd think they would be with the talent they have, but they do get the job done. And you're right, they do lead the country in the turnover margin. I think it's 3 a game, so they're making teams make mistakes and they're capitalizing on them. So good team. One thing I mentioned is with all the transfers, there's maybe not as much cohesion as you'd like. You probably have more of it next year and the year after. But obviously, a very auspicious start to the season. And Utah's a tough opponent. Utah still has a tough defense. There's some key matchups there with your receivers like Addison and Clark Phillips. We're going to be watching that all game long. The other thing would be Utah's struggles on the defensive line and getting to the quarterback. So if Caleb Williams has time to think and to move and to throw, then it might be a long night for Utah. Why do you think Utah wins this game?
The USC offense, when it is cruising, it is as good as there is in the country. There's been some times this year, and second half against Stanford, a little bit against Fresno State, Oregon State for 3 quarters of that game, and then kind of choppy a little bit against Washington State. So it's cropped up quite a bit to where it just wasn't clicking the way I think everybody involved expected it to. And I think what's huge is this being at Rice Eccles, right? The only road trips USC has had this year is going to Corvallis to play Oregon State and going to Palo Alto to play Stanford. That Stanford game was not a road game. So they have had kind of one true road game, and the fans in Corvallis made it really difficult on USC. And maybe that's part of what you're talking about. A lot of different transfers in. USC took 3 timeouts in the first half before I think like the 11-minute mark in the second quarter. They took one on their first possession. I think they took one on their second possession.
Hmm.
Did not handle crowd noise well at all. And so if the Utah fans show up, and that's kind of interesting because right, Utah's coming off the loss. What do the fans look like? You assume they're going to be crazy and like Utah
Hmm.
usually is. But they could really impact the game because again, USC, their one true road game, they did not play well offensively, and they had whether it was plays coming in late or kind of wasted motion, they were up against the clock, the play clock, a lot in that game, and they've had some spurts where maybe Caleb Williams misses a throw, the offensive line misses a block. It's been a choppy a little bit. So if they don't have it for 60 minutes offensively, that could keep Utah in the game. And then the other side, if Utah's run game is lighting
Hmm.
up USC's defense, that's a recipe to win. I mean, that's how I think that's how Utah would want to win this game by running all over them. And this is a USC defense that they've given up some chunk runs. They gave up a 55-yarder to Rice. There was another 50-yard. They've given up a couple 40-yard runs. So teams have hit them in the run game. The USC defense has done enough in the red zone and with takeaways to not give up a ton of points. They're pretty high up in terms of points per game allowed, and so they've made the plays when they've needed to. Teams have been able to run it at them. I think Arizona State, they held them to 88 yards, but Arizona State had over 100 rushing yards in the first half, and then a bunch of sacks, dropped that number down. Everyone else has gone sort of comfortably over 100 yards on the ground against USC, 150, 160, kind of those numbers that you've seen. If Utah puts everything they have into a ground game and they hit runs and they're moving, that'll make it really tough on USC.
Sure. That's a big matchup. Obviously, USC's had some trouble stopping the run this season. We've kind of got a wild card in Tavion Thomas, who originally was recruited by Ohio State. He's had a good career at Utah. I think he holds the record for touchdowns in a season for running back at Utah at 21. He's very, very good. We saw him in this last game against UCLA, and kind of puzzled why we didn't see more of him. He still rushed for almost 100 yards on the ground, and UCLA allowed that. In this case, you're right. I think Utah is going to do what they've always done, which is pound the rock. It's just going to be smash mouth football, rely on the play action to try and get some guys open downfield. Not to say that we don't have talent in the receiving core, but our bread and butter has always been running the football. And if we can exploit USC's defense this game, that's probably how we'll do it. Your secondary is pretty dang good. And so it'll be interesting to see Cam Rising match up against some of those guys. We do have some talent. Obviously, Devon Bailey has been really showing up in a big way this season. He's an integral part of our offense. Dalton Kincaid also creates. He's a great player. He'll be playing on Sundays. And we have some other guys who've got good hands who can make things happen. Obviously, not having Brant Keithy is turning out to be pretty big. So that's changed, that two tight end set that we were running quite a bit. So it'll be interesting to see if Utah can adjust. But yeah, that matchup in the secondary is going to be huge. My prediction would be that Utah gets a lot of yards on the ground. I think USC will kind of let that happen, maybe stack the box and force Rising to throw. But all in all, I think a pretty good matchup. And what I'd say is after this demoralizing loss to UCLA in the Rose Bowl, it's easy for fans to get down, especially when Utah came into this season as Goliath. Like we were supposed to repeat and we were supposed to be so good. Now the tables really have turned here, and USC's in that position. It looks like, or they very well could be. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is, despite feeling kind of down about this game and thinking, man, USC, they've always got just the best talent, just with they can match up with any program anywhere in terms of talent. And I just think that the spread's 3.5 for Utah. That's because it's at home, frankly. And it should be a close game. Although it wouldn't surprise me if SC ran away with this one either, because that's happened before. If you remember, in 2015, Utah was ranked third and came down to the Coliseum, and you guys boat raced us. So who knows what's going to happen? One thing I'd mention really quickly is, in my opinion, we've got a good divisional rivalry with USC. It's hard to debate that. It's going to be sad to see SC go for that reason. But there have been some great games in the short history of this rivalry, if you will. But it'll be close, and maybe it won't. It's just hard to tell. Utah kind of got exposed a little bit last week and really struggled with the speed of UCLA. They struggled with that quarterback DTR, who's very mobile and made things happen. And historically, Utah struggles with quarterbacks like that. We just kind of always have. I have to ask Erik, just really quickly. You're a USC Trojan through and through. Obviously, big supporter of the athletics program and the football team. And I just don't feel good talking unless we talk just a little bit about name, image, and likeness, NIL, the big three letters in college sports the last year. And USC has benefited from that. Obviously, Kyle Whittingham said in his presser that there were some disparities, and he was concerned about the future of college football. And I'd like to get your reaction to Whittingham's comments, and then just your general thoughts on name, image, and likeness, and what you think the future holds for college football.
For Whittingham's comments, I thought it was far more interesting, not so much what he said, but just that he would say anything about that when just given it seemed like, and I wasn't at the press conference, but it seemed like a bit of a softball just to kind of give a couple thoughts about Lincoln Riley and what he's done and that sort of thing, and then choosing to go the direction he did the week of this game, and to go into an area where he had to know this is going to kind of light up message boards, and this is going to be a talking point here. I thought it was really interesting to shift maybe attention away from the game to do that. As for his comments, the idea that the top 25 programs in the rankings are going to mirror the top 25 programs in terms of NIL money and that sort of thing. I mean, what are the top 25 programs historically in wins? That's what it's going to be. And I understand that kind of his point is that Utah has played with a lot of those teams recently and been able to put rosters together and be good. I still think there's a place for that. Kids are going to want to go play. They're going to want to play. If Utah offers them a place where they can go star and shine. Cam Rising, I assume, is doing just fine with NIL. Some of these big name guys can go to these schools and do really well, even real small markets. If you can, hit something locally and that sort of thing, you can still find that there. Turning that to what USC has done, and Utah fans, nobody really is going to like this outside of USC. I think USC has done a phenomenal job with name, image, likeness, and they've actually really slow played it. There was a lot of stuff about, Jordan Addison is leaving and he's only going because he's already got a deal there. That stuff was just not happening. USC took a long time to put together its Boulevard program, which is an in-house kind of full-scale media marketing, entity where fans can sort of donate to that, but it's not specifically a collective as a lot of other fan driven collectives are, where it's just, hey, let's just pile money together and sprinkle it over the field and let the players pick it up. This is something where when players get paid through Boulevard, they do, video promotions and they do kind of different things. They go to different spots and film videos. They have one where they talk about the music they like or the clothes they wear. They go to different LA taco shops and kind of pitch for those. And it is kind of a true NIL program where they're doing that. Now, Caleb Williams and Jordan Addison, I think what USC is able to highlight is Oklahoma took you this far, Pitt took you this far. Now you can come to USC where you're in Los Angeles and USC can take your brand another level. And that's just one of those built-in things that USC has always had, and they're absolutely going to take advantage of this where they can pitch Jordan Addison to United and Caleb Williams' profile becomes that much bigger when he's in Los Angeles. So I think that ultimately USC is doing it right. And I know, again, a lot of fans have always wanted to throw out, USC's paying players and cheating and doing all this stuff going back years and years and years. And that's something, right, in college football forever and ever. The teams that can get money to players are the teams that win a lot of games. But for USC right now, the way they've handled it, because they kind of had in the back of their minds, what might actually be happening, where the NCAA may eventually get around to saying, hey, let's look into some of these deals. And was it, were there inducements? Was it used for recruiting? All this stuff. They knew that that might be a possibility, which is why they were one of the very last programs to kind of announce their sort of school sponsored NIL. They call it a collective plus with Boulevard, what they do. So again, kind of a slow play into it. A lot of the players were like, hey, what's going on? We see what's going on, across the country, and you hear a lot of stuff, Texas A&M, Texas, a lot of those schools. But that's kind of how USC has handled it. It's definitely not sort of the $100 handshakes and boosters coming in and just sort of funneling money to a lot of the players. So, but I think ultimately it needed to go this way. College football players, that they were going to get paid, finding a way to do that in a way where they're still playing and it's still based on kind of them doing well in their sport. I think it's a good thing.
Sure, and it's interesting because if USC football goes 0-12 in a season, they'll still have the target on their back. It's just
And that's, you mentioned the 2015 game. Utah coming to the Coliseum is not USC going to Rice Eccles. Like Utah feels like a different program when they get USC at home. And so
Mhm.
that's why for me, ultimately, you want to look at matchups. You talked about Clark Phillips against the USC receivers, and that's huge. The trenches and all of that, that's huge. How USC handles playing at Utah, the environment, all of that, USC being able to come together and be on the same page. Boy, that to me is really big in this one.
Sure, and as far as NIL is concerned, the truth is we just don't know what's going to happen. I mean, it's so early. And as far as Utah is concerned, I think we're still trying to figure out what's going to work for our program. And we're not alone in that. But obviously, in a market like LA, you're going to get a lot of help. Like I've always said, USC is the Lakers of college football, and it's true. So you guys kind of get what you want, albeit not always great coaches. But hopefully you're riding the ship with that, and it's going to be a heck of a matchup this
That's
Saturday
a
night.
so I don't mean to cut him, but that's a
Sure.
point too. I think that teams are finding out that this is not Clay Helton's USC team coming in. Like these guys are practicing, they're hitting, they're physical. It's a different USC team. So the idea that they're gonna kind of fall apart and not be physical, and there's gonna be kind of some lapses in
Sure.
offensive calls or things like that. That's been something to watch for USC this year as well.
And I don't think that Lincoln Riley is having ice cream socials with his players. I think that's probably the biggest difference as far as I'm concerned. That might get you the win this Saturday, but we won't know until late Saturday night. But Erik, so grateful to you for coming on and for helping us out and giving us your side of things. And I think we've got a heck of a game coming up, and may the best team win.
Yeah, gonna be a fun one. I mean, this is one we all had, I think, circled preseason, and kind of surprising that it's here already. But yeah, looking forward to it.
And you fans also check out our podcast after the SC game. So we'll take it away.